progress to the internal portion of the examination, and this is a view of Mr. Wright's chest with the skin reflected. So what we're looking at are the ribs and the breastbone, and you can see areas of hemorrhage on the left and right side of the body that are consistent with the points of entry and exit of the bullet through the chest wall.
And could you just indicate on the screen where those areas of hemorrhage are, please?
Yes, so these are the dark areas present here, and on the right side in this vicinity.
Okay. And then was there could you indicate the approximate area where the projectile was recovered as well?
Yes, the projectile would have been recovered. So the defect in the muscle on the right side is approximately here, so the projectile was recovered near where I made an attempted asterisk.
And then if we could put, just a moment, if we could put Exhibit 143 on the screen, please. Could you describe what's shown here?
Yes, so this might be a little bit disorienting. This is a view of the chest plate that we've removed, and it's viewed from the inside. So what we're seeing here are the ribs, and we're seeing the perforations through the muscles and the bone on the left-hand side. And there's a probe that's inserted to demonstrate the approximate path of the bullet. And again, this is inside the chest, so the left side is the decedent's left side, and the right side is the decedent's right side.
And do you, through the course of your work, sometimes use rods or probes like this to help you establish trajectory or a bullet path?
We do.
And if we could put Exhibit 145 on the screen, please. Could you describe what's shown here, please?
Yes, this is a review, or an example of the exhibit that shows the damage to the front of the heart. And there is a gap in the tissue covering the right ventricle, the left ventricle, and the muscular septum that divides the two ventricles.
And when you say gap in the tissue, maybe you could just describe what you mean by that.
Yes, there is normally, instead of being able to see inside of the heart, there's tissue and blood vessels that would span this gap, this defect that we're seeing in the heart wall. And they're missing here in this image.
And in a normal heart, a healthy heart, would that all be covered up?
Correct. It would look more like the surfaces that you're seeing at the very top of the image.
Okay. We could put Exhibit 146 on the screen, please. Now, using this image, could you please describe what organs were impacted and what you observed on the inside of the body with respect to the trajectory?
Yes, I selected this diagram, and I would point out that it is a diagram in 2 dimensions, so it doesn't capture exactly the orientation in the body, but it does show the general pattern of injury. So there is an arrow superimposed over the heart and lungs depicted in this diagram. The entrance point was somewhere near the base of the arrow, and the bullet was recovered somewhere near the tip of the arrow. So you can see, even though that the wound direction was shallow through the chest, as we saw in the previous image, it did cross areas of the left lung, the heart, and the right lung.
Again, members of the jury, remember this is demonstrative evidence. It will not go back to the jury room with you.
Dr. Jackson, I know I didn't show you photographs of the lungs, but could you describe for the jury the damage to the organs in the body that you observed consistent with this demonstrative exhibit?
Yes, both the left lung and the right lung, the anterior portions, or the portions abutting the chest wall in the front, were damaged, almost a graze wound, but very superficially injured by the bullet. The majority of the injury was to the heart.
Did you also recover a substantial amount of blood from inside Mr. Wright's body during this process?
Yes.
Approximately how much blood did you recover?
So the combined volume from both sides of the chest, so around the right and left lungs and the heart, were over 3 liters of blood.
And 3 liters, why is that significant?
That's significant because an individual of Mr. Wright's size would have approximately 4.5 to 5.5 liters of blood in his entire body, and when you lose half of that rapidly, your condition becomes critical.
And when you say critical, what does that mean?
It's a life-threatening situation.
With respect to timing, was this gunshot wound, the injuries that you observed through the heart and the lungs, was that a survivable injury?
As a forensic pathologist, I would say no.
How long does it take for someone to die after being shot through the lungs and heart like this?
Injuries like this, we refer to survival times in terms of seconds to minutes in these types of injuries.
And with respect to loss of consciousness, how long does it take for someone to lose consciousness after an injury like this?
Well, one can lose consciousness within 10 to 15 seconds after blood supply is cut off to the brain.
Now, Dr. Jackson, do you have, throughout your experience as an assistant medical examiner, experience with a variety of different types of ammunition of different calibers?
Yes, that's part of our training.
And have you observed and recovered projectiles of both large and small caliber?
Yes.
If we could put exhibits 147 and 148 on the screen next to each other, please. You indicated that you recovered a projectile. Could you just describe what's shown here, please?
Yes, so this is the image on the left and right show front and back views of the projectile that I've recovered. It's a clean view. What we're seeing here is a projectile with an expanded tip. It's a copper color jacketed projectile with a lead color core, and the image on the left shows the base view of the projectile, which had a measured diameter of 9 millimeters.
And with respect to your measurements, would that be consistent with a 9 millimeter round?
Certainly would, and those are measurements I made at the time of autopsy.
And when you describe the expansion or the condition of the bullet, maybe you could contrast that with other bullets that you've seen.
Well, I think what we're seeing here is a bullet that does show an expanded tip, and some people call this mushrooming, the appearance that we're seeing here. Others see a petal-like arrangement, and this can happen in certain types of ammunition.
And would that be consistent with a hollow point round?
Yes, hollow points often look like this.
And what, if anything, in your experience as an assistant Hennepin County medical examiner, is significant about a round of ammunition that displays this type of effect, this petaling or mushrooming?
I think the main thing is these bullets oftentimes stop within the body, which is consistent with what we found here.
And again, is the condition of this bullet and the injuries that you saw, is the condition of the bullet consistent with the injuries that you saw?
Yes.
Including the damage to the heart and the lungs?
Yes, a bullet like this could cause the injuries that we've observed.
You also described an examination of clothing. Did you examine Mr. Wright's clothing in this case as well?
Yes, I did.
If we could put exhibits 149 and 152 on the screen next to each other, please. Could you describe what's shown here, please?
Yes, this is Mr. Wright's shirt, the shirt that he wore presumably under his jacket. I've put it in place on a mannequin so that we could photograph it, and there are defects on the left and right sides depicted here. They're small, but they're present.
And when you say defects, could you circle them or indicate them, please, on the screen?
Yes, so on the left-hand image, I'm going to circle an area on the front left side of the shirt. I put a piece of white gauze behind the hole, the defect, to illustrate where that is. And on the image on the right, which is the right-hand side of the shirt, I will circle this image here. that is an area of a defect in the fabric or a hole in the fabric.
So when you say defect, does that mean hole in this case?
Yes, they're interchangeable.
And were those holes consistent with the trajectory and the injuries that you observed?
Yes, they approximately recapitulate the injuries that we saw on the body.
And then if we could put exhibits 150, just put exhibit 155 alone on the screen, please. Did you also examine a jacket as well that Mr. Wright was wearing?
Yes, this is the jacket as placed again on the mannequin.
And with respect to the red substance on the clothing, was that consistent with blood?
Yes.
And then if we could put exhibits 157 and 158 next to each other on the screen, please. Did you also examine the jacket for defects or holes?
Yes, and holes were found near the pockets on both sides of the front of this jacket.
And if you could indicate them on the screen.
Yes, so on the left, circled here, is a hole with frayed margins that is present near the front left pocket. And on the right image is a defect that I found in the lining of the pocket, the right pocket. And again, I put white gauze behind that to make it photo worthy.
Now, obviously, Dr. Jackson, the pocket line of someone's clothing might not be typically where you would expect to find the heart. Could you describe if these defects or holes would be consistent with clothing being bunched up or raised up on the body?
Yes, certainly, depending on where the clothing was positioned, they could be consistent with the pattern. And we do have them on the left and right sides of the garment. And again, that, like we saw in the shirt, it is similar and supports the same pattern we saw on the body.
Now, during your autopsy examination, did you collect a number of samples as well?
I did.
Things like blood and hair, nail clippings, and fingerprints? Is that
Yes.
right? And you indicated that you also collected these, this projectile as well as the clothing, is that right?
Correct.
And were those items all provided to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension?
Yes, they were.
And then with respect to the toxicology testing in this case, did you also collect femoral blood and urine for toxicology testing in the afternoon of April 12th?
Yes, during the course of the autopsy.
And then did you order testing on those samples as well?
I did.
And what screens were done on the blood?
So we did a comprehensive screen on the blood, and that includes an expanded panel and additional studies. And our aim was to potentially survey for as many possible drugs as possible in this case.
Did that include looking for hundreds of drugs?
Yes, hundreds of drugs were sought after, yes.
And what, did you get the results of those tests?
We did.
And what, if any, compounds were found from the testing of the femoral blood?
Cannabinoids were the only thing found in the decedent system.
And when you say cannabinoids, is that THC and its metabolites?
Exactly that, yes.
And are those related to marijuana?
They are.
Were those toxicology results that you received in any way significant with respect to your determination of cause and manner of death?
No, they were not.
And then on exam, did you find any natural disease or natural defect that would have caused Mr. Wright's death?
No, the only thing we found were injury-related changes associated with the gunshot wound.
And now, Dr. Jackson, based on your training and experience, did you ultimately determine a cause of death for Daunte Wright in this case?
Yes.
And what was the cause of death?
The cause of death in this case was gunshot wound of the chest.
And did you also determine a manner of death for Daunte Wright?
Yes, this is certified as a homicide.
And what is the definition of homicide with respect to your work?
Homicide is death at the hands of another.
And how did you make the determination that Daunte Wright died by homicide?
The examination of the wound and the history provided supported that he was shot by another individual and succumbed to those injuries.
And if we could put Exhibit 160 on the screen, please. Dr. Jackson, is this a copy of your office's final ME report for Daunte Wright?
Yes.
And that's based on your findings, but signed by the chief medical examiner in your office?
That's correct. That's routine policy. Yeah.
And with respect to manner of death, focusing on this area here, what is indicated as the manner of death?
Manner of death is homicide.
And what's the immediate cause that's indicated?
Gunshot.
I object to this. He's gone over this 3 times now. The cause and manner of death.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
You may answer, Dr. Jackson.
The immediate cause of death is gunshot wound of the chest.
And then did you also indicate how the injury occurred?
Yes.
And how was that?
And we've listed here, decedent was shot by another person, and in parentheses, law enforcement officer.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Counsel, you may cross. You may cross.
Okay. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
With respect to the homicide and cause and manner of death, that has nothing to do with criminal statutes, is that right?
That is correct. Our manner is a medical opinion.
Okay, and it's quite obvious that the cause of death in this case was a gunshot wound to the chest, correct?
Agreed.
And I notice in your autopsy, your final autopsy, excuse me, you wrote 20-year-old man who was shot by a police officer after a traffic stop and subsequently drove his car a short distance before colliding with another vehicle. Is that the information you received when you came on the scene?
That's correct.
And the marijuana found in the system, did you send that to a lab or some other place to determine how much marijuana was in the system?
Well, as a part of the normal toxicology studies, they do quantify those numbers, the numbers of marijuana or anything they do find, yes.
And do you know what the quantifying what the result was?
They're in my report.
Okay, and what are they?
If I may refer to my report.
Sure.
So in the femoral blood, we found 11-hydroxy delta-9 THC, which is a metabolite. The level present was 6.9 nanograms per milliliter. There was delta-9 carboxy THC, which is an inactive metabolite. This was present at a concentration of 120 nanograms per milliliter. And delta-9 THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana, the level was 43 nanograms per milliliter.
And the active ingredient, what you mean by that is that's what affects you when you take the marijuana?
Yes.
And is 43 a high reading?
43 is a number within the normal range of individuals reported that use marijuana.
Okay. Use marijuana regularly or right before the death?
That's difficult to ascertain based on just the numbers alone.
I don't know if you answered my question. Is that a high reading based on your experience, toxicology-wise?
It's on the high end of numbers that I see, yes.
Thanks. And you testified that Mr. Wright was conscious for seconds after he was shot. Fair statement?
No, I said the injuries he sustained, he could survive for minutes, seconds to minutes, and then if blood supply is cut off to the brain, then one can be rendered unconscious in a short time, matter of seconds.
Yes, that's what I meant. you do know in this case, from what you were briefed on, that Mr. Wright said you shot me. Did you know that?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Pardon me?
I'm not aware of statements uttered by the
In
deceased.
any event, as you reported, he drove off after the shot. Is that what you learned?
That was reported, yes.
And he could have driven off like that for up to a minute. Fair statement?
Objection calls for speculation.
He's the expert judge.
The objection is overruled.
So he could have driven off like that and been alive for up to a minute. Fair statement?
I would say that's possible.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Is there any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Jackson, you were asked about what might possibly happen to a body under these circumstances. If you could just describe to the jury what physiologically happens to the body when a heart is shot with a gunshot.
In my profession, we don't see directly what happens to individuals. We are called in after the fact. But from my medical training, when an individual loses significant blood, they tend to become unconscious, or they could exhibit altered mental status.
And when you say loses significant blood, did you recover a significant amount of blood from inside Daunte Wright's body?
Yes,
Consistent with blood loss that you're describing.
correct.
And when you see someone lose blood in the amount of 3 liters, what do you expect to happen to them physiologically?
I expect physiologically for the heart to be unable to pump blood to the organs, and I expect to see organs that shut down and loss of function occurring.
And when you expect to see that the heart isn't pumping blood and the organs are not functioning, what does that look like from the outside?
Could you clarify what you're asking?
Sure. If the heart is not able to pump blood to the organs and the body is losing blood, what happens to an observer? What does the observer see is happening to the body?
I think the person observing might see someone that appears unconscious or unresponsive, if that's what you're asking.
Yes. So you'd expect someone that was shot through the heart to be unconscious within a matter of seconds. Is that fair?
Object that as leading, Your Honor. Also repetitious.
The objection is sustained.
I'll move on, Your Honor. With respect to marijuana or the THC levels that you saw, you indicated that those were potentially on high levels of what you've seen. Is that right?
Yes.
In the course of your career of doing 1,800 plus autopsies, have you ever ruled a death, an overdose as a result of marijuana use?
I have not.
So when you say that these levels are insignificant with respect to your cause and manner of death finding, what does that mean?
That means relative to the injury sustained during the gunshot wound, there is no significant importance to the level of THC found in the decedent's system.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further?
You understood, did you not, Doctor, that when I was asking about the marijuana, I was not implying that this was a cause of death. I was just asking what was in his blood, correct?
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
All right. You may step down. Thank you.
Thank you.